Hey guys, welcome into Bayou Bengals. Yeah, so I know it's been a while, but yeah, I just want to talk about the LSU depth chart. So, I mean, I think if you look at the LSU depth chart, I think you look at it as like, okay, you bring in a new defensive coordinator. We lost some guys in the NFL, Mason Smith. I think you look at the and you're like a lot of familiar faces, which sometimes a lot of returning starters isn't always a good thing because like you got to think if we were not very good last year, having a lot of the same guys back on defense, could equate to us not being good. But you look at some guys like Harold Perkins is a stud. Savion Jones has been okay. I mean, you look at a guy like Ashton Stamps, he could take another step. I think it's a lot. It's a lot of guys who solid players, but you look at like the right defensive coordinator, and you put these guys all in a position where they can make plays and they can really excel. And then I think you could be looking at a very improved LSU defense. And the offense, I think one thing, if you can guarantee one thing about this LSU football team, I think it's the offensive line is going to be really strong. DJ Chester, a good player. Miles Frazier, a guy with a lot of experience. He's played a lot of football, started a lot of games for him. Emory Jones started the last 2 years for him. Then Will Campbell. Will Campbell arguably is maybe the best player for next year's draft, potential top 3 pick in the NFL draft. So the LSU offensive line going to be strong. Mason Taylor, a good player. He hopefully has a season more like the 2022 campaign as opposed to last year, but Mason Taylor, good football player nonetheless, and a versatile tight end. So, and then you look at wide receiver group: Aaron Anderson, Kyron Lacey, Chris Hilton. They do lose Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, but some familiar faces and some guys that can make plays. Kyron Lacey had a nice season last year. I think he maybe underperformed a little bit relative to expectations, but he's got some ability. Chris Hilton Jr., Aaron Anderson. And you still got some guys like Shelton Sampson, Kyle Parker, highly recruited guys that I think could take another step in their development next year. And then, I mean, even on defense, too, the Weeks brothers, Deshaun Womack, he was a big-time recruit. Womack's got some athleticism. I mean, this guy can legitimately come off the edge, and he moves well. I mean, burst off the line of scrimmage. A lot of times that's why guys like him are touted as 5-star guys, just because that burst off the line of scrimmage, it was apparent in high school, and it's how he was able to create so many tackles, and just get to the quarterback often. So that's kind of the ability that Deshaun Womack's going to bring to this LSU team. In the secondary, too, still got Major Burns, bring over a couple transfers, Jarden Gilbert, P.J. Woodland. So, yeah, I mean, you look at LSU, I think it's interesting. They're kind of, I talk Michigan football, too, a lot on my other channel. They're kind of in a position similar to Michigan where you're thinking okay, we lost a lot of NFL guys. No Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. You lose 3 first-round picks. You lose Mason Smith, too, as a second-round pick. Excuse me. So you lose some talented guys, but also you're thinking okay, but we still do have at least, Will Campbell, Harold Perkins. We at least have 2 true NFL difference makers. And what I mean by that is these guys could be top 10 picks. So Will Campbell and Harold Perkins, at least you can guarantee those guys, if they're healthy, they are true difference makers at their respective positions, both on opposite sides of the football. And then, still got Zy Alexander, too. Sage Ryan, they're going to project to play him at strong safety. It's good they brought Sage Ryan back. It looked like he was going to transfer. And then still got Garrett Dellinger, too. So a lot of guys with a good combination on the offensive line of experience and just high-end level talent. I think that's really the formula for why LSU is going to be strong once again in the offensive line. It's just, a legit combination of NFL talented guys, Emory Jones, Will Campbell, and then guys with experience got like Miles Frazier, Garrett Dellinger, Miles Frazier played a lot of football, and then you do kind of have the guy DJ Chester with not as much experience, but Chester, this is a guy who could be in the discussion with Will Campbell and Miles Frazier as a first round pick. Obviously, he's not draft eligible next year, but I think somewhere down the line, DJ Chester will be an NFL guy. But yeah, I haven't really looked at too many of the incoming freshmen LSU has. Some of these guys, Gabriel Reelford, Dominique McKinley. You haven't really got a chance to watch and see what kind of players some of these guys are. AJ Swan was a transfer quarterback they got. Where was this guy from Vanderbilt? So yeah, I think LSU kind of similar to Michigan in the sense I think they didn't really emphasize doing a whole lot in the transfer portal, but I think that to me hiring a new defensive coordinator was if you talk about if you had a checklist of priorities to accomplish in the offseason, I think defensive coordinator certainly was the number one on their list, and they at least hammered that home. And then just getting some guy, kind of like last year, it didn't really necessarily work out, but let's see if we can find some more guys that can play in the secondary. You hope Jordan Gilbert, PJ Woodland. I think that's kind of like the hope with the transfer portal is I think what's too bad about the transfer portal, I think a lot of times it's feast or famine. But sometimes sometimes there is that in between where you find a guy that's just, pretty solid, pretty good player. But I think oftentimes it's feast or famine, meaning you get a guy and it hasn't worked out elsewhere. And oftentimes if it hasn't worked out elsewhere for him, it's not going to work out at the next stop. So I think that's kind of the thing with Jordan Gilbert, Woodland. Could these guys just be solid for him? And that could be great, but could they also just be not very good or below average and hurt them? That's very reasonable. But yeah, you hope that they are very good, but they could be they could underperform, and then you're kind of scratching your head in the secondary. But yeah, it's kind of weird that LSU is going into another season where they still have question marks in the secondary, because LSU, that was one thing for a long time at LSU, especially under Les Miles. It's just like you knew that the secondary was going to be at least solid. Oftentimes it was good. Some years it was great. Some years it was elite. Like you look at the year they had Tyrann Mathieu, Morris Claiborne. There was some legitimately elite secondaries at LSU. Even in 2019 with Grant Delpit, Derek Stingley, and then they had the other corner too. His name escapes me, but LSU most years good to great secondaries, a couple years elite secondaries, and then now last year, in this upcoming year, you're still kind of searching. The hope would be, if you want to talk complete optimism for LSU, you hope Ashton Stamps is the guy. You hope that he takes another step. You hope that Sage Ryan is pretty good out there. You hopefully Javen Taviano takes some steps. You hopefully Womack can become that elite speed edge rusher. You hope the offensive line lives up to the billing. I think it's safe to say this is going to be a good offensive line, but staying with the optimistic theme, you hope this could be another very good to elite offensive line. I would say last year, you could argue the offensive line was elite. Last year, I'd say at the very least, it was a very good offensive line. So, but yeah, Kyle Parker, that's a guy to keep an eye on. And then, Kyle Parker, Shelton Sampson, these are guys I really like their high school tape. Hopefully they can hopefully they can contribute next year. CJ Daniels is a transfer from Liberty here. Haven't really got to watch him. But yeah, Aaron Anderson's got a lot of ability too. It's a guy that's good in space, good after the catch. They just got to find ways to get him the ball, especially in the open field. And I think their offensive coordinator can do that. It looks like they're going to run the 4-3 next year. I'm a fan of the 4-3. I think, yeah, how do they use, looks like they're going to play Perkins at the weak side linebacker. How do they use Harold Perkins? I think, I don't know, it'll be interesting. But, Harold Perkins is a guy I just love watch playing football. I mean, it's a guy that Harold Perkins is a dude. And what I mean by that, he's just like, the guy moves different, like burst, acceleration. The guy's just an athletic freak. And I think that, if you talk about, if we're kind of shifting here for his NFL future, kind of the argument against guys like him is like, you'd rather have just a guy that is going to be elite at one position. But I think Harold Perkins is such an exceptional athlete. I think he's just going to make it work in the NFL, whatever position that may be. Maybe they play him almost like what they do with Derwin James, is almost like a slot nickel corner, just so you can kind of have him. You can keep him in coverage because he's got enough coverage ability, but you can also keep him close to the line of scrimmage where he can make tackles. So I think that'll be interesting with Harold Perkins as far as his NFL future is concerned. And then Jacoby and Gilroy, too, another guy. Gilroy just like, that's kind of a guy where he's been okay, but just like you've kind of really been scratching your head why he hasn't really developed into a star player. But Gilroy, I mean, has a chance this year to really, has a chance this year to do some nice things. And then Josh Williams at running back, Caleb Jackson, really like Caleb Jackson's ability. Josh Williams, a lot of experience. Caleb Jackson, highly touted recruit, got to see a lot of ability. Didn't necessarily get to see him a lot, but when you saw him you got to see his ability. In the John Emery Jr. too. Kamarion Pimpton too at tight end. Markway, I like Markway. I like his blocking ability. Probably will get to see Markway more often this year just because of the ability he has a blocker. Also does have some receiving ability, but I really like his ability as a blocker. So, yeah, LSU, I mean, experience at wide receiver, should be a strong offensive line. Garrett Nussmeier should be solid at quarterback too. I think that's at least with Nussmeier, at least you got a guy with experience. I think that's what's big for LSU. I think even though Nussmeier may not perform at as high a level as Jaden Daniels, because I think that's asking a lot, but Nussmeier is a good, at least he's going to be solid back there at quarterback. It's a guy that can, he's not afraid to sling the ball. He can hit the downfield passes fairly consistently. So at least you got a guy in Nussmeier with some experience, been in the program. So, and then Savion Jones got experience. So kind of just going by position. Gilroy, Lee, both the defensive tackles experience. Swinson experience. So kind of the same, kind of a similar theme with LSU on both sides of the ball. It's a lot of experience. It's more so, can the coaching continue at a high level on the offensive line offensively, and can the new defensive coordinator in the I don't know exactly all the changes they made, but I assume they brought in some new guys defensively. Can they just put these guys in positions to be successful? Not just Harold Perkins, because Perkins is going to do some big things regardless of where he's at. But can we have guys? Can a good defensive scheme, will that help out? Will that take a guy like Savion Jones or Stamps or Greg Penn? Can that give those guys a boost? I think it certainly could. So offensive line should be strong again. Still have a really good coach in Brian Kelly. So reason for optimism with LSU and experience. So reason for optimism. Good head coach, very good head coach, new defensive coordinator, some transfers, and then we'll see. And then some freshmen that are highly touted, and we'll see how they go. So optimism for LSU, some things to question, and then who takes the next step, and then certainly a couple of difference makers: Harold Perkins, Will Campbell.